unfold.
Have you ever wondered if we could just build another Earth? You know, a perfect, self-contained world sealed up in a bottle, like a backup plan for humanity. Well, back in the early 90s, a group of people actually tried to do it. So let's dive into this absolutely incredible, audacious, and ultimately cautionary tale. I mean, the vision was just breathtaking. A 3-acre miniature Earth, complete with its own rainforest, an ocean, a desert, even a farm, all sealed under this massive glass dome in the Arizona desert. And this wasn't just some fancy greenhouse, you know. This was designed to be a real blueprint for colonizing Mars. It was the ultimate test to see if we could actually recreate our planet's life support system from scratch. Because as you can probably guess, inside this sealed paradise, something went terribly, terribly wrong. The air literally started to vanish, species went extinct, and the 8 humans who were trapped inside, well, they turned on each other. So how did this futuristic utopia become this unbelievable story of survival and collapse? That's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the engineering. You really have to appreciate the sheer ambition here, because before all the biology went sideways, the technology was, in a lot of ways, a stunning success.
I mean, just look at this thing. It's over 3 acres, built with this massive steel frame and custom-designed glass panels. The entire structure sat on a 500-ton welded steel pan, just to stop anything from getting in or out from the ground. The number one goal, the whole point, was to create a totally closed system. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out, period.
And you know what? They pretty much nailed it. The leak rate was less than 10% a year, which is way more airtight than even the International Space Station. But here's the crazy part, and the real irony of this slide. That incredible engineering triumph, that perfect seal, it also became its biggest vulnerability. With no buffer, any little imbalance inside was just trapped, and it got magnified like crazy. And this just shows you the kind of wild problems they had to solve. See, the air inside this giant glass box would expand like crazy in the hot desert sun, and then contract at night. That change in pressure would have shattered the whole thing. So the solution was these 2 giant lungs, which allowed the entire building to literally breathe, expanding and contracting with the temperature every single day. I mean, that's pure genius.
So if the engineering was so smart, where did the problems start? Well, to understand that, we've got to look at the project's very unconventional foundation. It turns out the fatal flaw was baked into the blueprint from day one. Right, so this wasn't born in a NASA lab or at some big university. It was the brainchild of John P. Allen, this really charismatic leader who ran a countercultural commune and theater group. And the whole thing was funded by a devoted Texas oil heir, Ed Bass. This meant the crew wasn't really a team of independent scientists. They were a super tight-knit, insular group, all deeply loyal to Allen and his vision. So here's the crucial point. Because it was all privately funded, they didn't have to go through that slow, critical, and frankly super important process of scientific peer review. This let them build their dream incredibly fast, sure, but it also meant that some really big mistakes were designed right into the system from the start, with no outside experts there to raise a red flag. And it didn't take long after the doors were sealed for those mistakes to start bubbling to the surface. The perfectly engineered box started to become a death trap as the web of life inside began to completely unravel. Okay, this chart right here shows the single most critical failure. The air started to disappear. Oxygen levels just plummeted, going from a normal 20.9% all the way down to a dangerously low 14.2% in just over a year. To put that in perspective, that's like living on a mountain summit over 13,000 feet high, but with 0 time to get used to it. So where did all the oxygen go? It was like this bizarre geochemical whodunit. First, the soil they put inside was way too rich in nutrients, which caused a population explosion of microbes. These little guys started inhaling oxygen and exhaling CO2 like crazy. But here's the twist. The massive amounts of uncured concrete in the building's walls started chemically reacting with all that CO2, pulling it right out of the air. The walls were literally stealing the CO2, starving the plants of the gas they needed to photosynthesize and make new oxygen. And this atmospheric crisis just triggered a total wave of collapse. All the bees and other pollinators, they died out. This meant the crew had to pollinate all their food crops by hand. Most of the little animal species, the vertebrates, they went extinct.
The trees, which grew without the stress of wind, became weak and brittle and literally snapped under their own weight. And while all the delicate species were dying, the pests were thriving. Invasive crazy ants and cockroaches just took over everything.
This ecological crisis, as you can imagine, quickly became a human one. As their world failed around them, the 8 Biosphereans inside began to break down too. Their little farm was failing, which meant they were starving. For the first 6 months, the crew was surviving on an average of just 1,780 calories a day, all while doing heavy physical labor. This wasn't some kind of health diet. This was a state of chronic, gnawing hunger. They got obsessed with food, looking their plates clean just to get every last calorie. But here's the really wild part. While they were absolutely miserable and losing about 16% of their body weight, their medical tests showed they were incredibly healthy. Their cholesterol and blood pressure just plummeted. Their bodies became hyper-efficient at using nutrients. So it ended up being this groundbreaking, though totally unintentional, experiment in calorie restriction. All that physical stress and the constant hunger just shattered their social bonds. The crew split into 2 warring factions. One group stayed loyal to the mission's management outside, insisting they stick to the closed system rule no matter what. The other group, though, started prioritizing the crew's health and demanding some scientific honesty about all the failures. By the second year, they had completely stopped speaking to each other. Then came the PR disaster. A crew member, Jane Pointer, injured her hand and had to be evacuated for surgery. When she came back, she brought a duffel bag with her. Well, rumors started flying that it was full of smuggled food and supplies. Management denied it, but the media just seized on the story, and the whole perception of a perfectly sealed, honest experiment was shattered for good. So yeah, the project absolutely failed its primary goal, but that magnificent failure, it probably taught us more than success ever could have. By January of 1993, the crew was actually suffering from cognitive problems because of the oxygen deprivation. Management finally gave in, broke the seal, and pumped in 23 tons of liquid oxygen. This quote from Jane Pointer just perfectly captures that euphoric, life-saving feeling. It was the moment that saved their lives, but it was also the official admission that their self-sustaining world had failed. The aftermath was just chaos. The first mission ended, and the project's finances were in ruins. And in a twist you honestly can't make up, the oil heir, Ed Bass, hired a then investment banker named Steve Bannon to take over the whole thing. Bannon came in and ousted the original management, which led 2 of the original crew members to sneak back into the facility and sabotage it, breaking the seal in protest. The dream was officially over. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, there are 3 huge lessons. First, our planet is stable because it's so massive. Its oceans and atmosphere act as these giant buffers. Small systems just don't have that luxury. Second, you can't just build an ecosystem. The sheer complexity of nature, from the stress of wind on trees to the role of tiny pollinators, is something we don't fully understand, let alone know how to replicate. And finally, the human factor is always a wild card. Social bonds can be just as fragile and just as essential as any other life support system. Biosphere 2 was a spectacular failure at creating a new world, but maybe its real success was in giving us this terrifying, fast-forwarded glimpse of just how complex, interconnected, and fragile our own planet, Biosphere 1, truly is. It really leaves you wondering. Their perfectly sealed world collapsed in just 2 years. What does that say about how carefully we need to manage the one we've already got?